0. Welcome to Asian ID in the fragile stillness of a winter midnight on a distant film set, where breath turns into mist and emotions flicker under artificial lights. How could a single unexpected embrace ignite a storm that blurs the boundary between fiction and reality? When Wang Haozhen stepped into the cold chaos of that sleepless set, wrapped tightly against the freezing air yet carrying a warmth no costume could conceal, was it merely a colleague visiting another, or the beginning of a story the audience was already desperate to believe as Guo Yuxin turned, her eyes lighting up with a recognition too swift and too bright to be rehearsed? Did that fleeting moment belong to the script, or did it slip uncontrollably from the hidden corners of the heart when she ran toward him, almost weightless with excitement, and fell into a long, lingering embrace that seemed to suspend time itself? Were we witnessing a performance perfected by skill, or a truth too genuine to be contained in? When cameras captured her hand refusing to let go, her head resting naturally on his shoulder as if it had always belonged there, did those gestures speak louder than any line ever written? The internet erupted with admiration, calling it too sweet, but beneath that sweetness, was there not a deeper hunger, a desire to believe that what we see on screen could somehow exist beyond it? The audiences cling so fiercely to the illusion that chemistry must equal reality, as if the magic of storytelling alone is no longer enough to satisfy the heart. Perhaps the answer lies in the rise of short dramas, where intensity replaces duration and emotions are delivered in concentrated bursts. But does this immediacy quietly train us to crave emotional gratification without questioning its authenticity? When a fictional romance stretches across 13 years of longing within a script, and then seems to echo in real-life interactions, are we falling in love with the characters, or projecting those feelings onto the actors themselves? And when production teams recognize this emotional investment and begin to cultivate it deliberately, shaping interactions, encouraging proximity, and feeding the narrative beyond the screen, can we still call it coincidence? The phenomenon of CP marketing thrives on this delicate ambiguity, but is it not also a carefully constructed bridge that invites audiences to cross from imagination into belief? For actors, this bridge is not without cost, because as they walk it repeatedly, smiling, touching, laughing under the watchful gaze of millions, where does the performance end and the self begin? When intimacy becomes an expectation rather than a choice, does it not transform genuine human connection into a form of labor, measured, performed, and consumed? Enough actors must constantly maintain a certain closeness to satisfy fans, even when the cameras are not rolling. Are they still living their own lives, or merely extending their roles indefinitely? There is a quiet tension here, a fracture between the artist and the commodity. But how long can such a fracture remain invisible before it begins to reshape the person within? If they choose to withdraw, to protect their private selves, they risk being labeled distant or uncooperative. But if they continue to give more, to share more, to blur more lines, do they not risk losing something far more essential? What happens to identity when it is stretched between expectation and authenticity? When every smile is analyzed, every gesture decoded, every silence the audience, too, is not untouched by this cycle? Because as exposure increases and repetition sets in, does the magic not begin to fade, replaced by a quiet fatigue we struggle to admit when the same pairing appears again and again, repeating familiar dynamics, familiar emotions, familiar tropes? Does the once thrilling chemistry not slowly dissolve into predictability? And when that happens, do we blame the actors for failing to surprise us, or do we confront our own role in demanding the same illusion until it loses its power? There have been countless examples where beloved pairings, once celebrated as irreplaceable, became victims of their own success. But is this not the inevitable consequence of overconsumption? If novelty is sacrificed for consistency, and authenticity is traded for marketability, can any emotional connection, no matter how genuine it once seemed, survive the weight of expectation and response? The industry has begun to acknowledge these tensions, introducing guidelines, protections, and calls for balance. But can regulations alone restore boundaries that have already been eroded by desire? Or does the responsibility also lie with the actors, who must navigate this landscape with awareness, choosing carefully what to reveal and what to protect, even when the cost of restraint is misunderstood? And what of us, the viewers, who sit behind our screens, dissecting moments, amplifying narratives, and weaving stories out of fragments? Are we merely observers, or active participants in this delicate distortion? When we watch an embrace and feel our hearts race, are we celebrating human connection, or quietly demanding that it be real for our own satisfaction? Perhaps the true beauty of storytelling lies not in its ability to convince us that it is real, but in its power to move us while we know it is not. But have we forgotten how to appreciate that distinction? The embrace between Wang Haozhen and Guo Yuxin may remain unforgettable, shimmering somewhere between truth and illusion, but does its meaning depend on whether it was real, or on what it made us feel. And as we continue to consume stories that blur the line between performance and reality, should we not pause and ask ourselves one unsettling question: are we still watching the story? Or have we begun to rewrite it with our own desires? Thank you for watching the video. See you again.